Okay, let's try to calm your minds and my mind, Dorje's mind. Sit comfortably with your spine erect. Place your attention on the breathing, your mindfulness on your respiration. So just as if you were carrying a glass filled to the brim, say hot tea for grandma, and you had to be walking through the room with all the kids shouting and maneuvering around things, still you'd be mindful of not spilling that. So be mindful here of your breathing, even if your mind might be temporarily distracted to some outer sounds or impulses. Recognize when you're breathing in as opposed to breathing out. Recognize when it's an exhalation. Let go not only of the outer distractions, but also the inner distractions, the thoughts that may be coming to your mind, memories, associations. Let go of the sense of your body that's appearing to your consciousness seemingly without choice. By focusing on the breathing, you can let go of your attention to that. Follow a breath down to your heart area and just abide with your attention there, watching the mental consciousness. At first, just trying to see the space between the moments of thoughts, the discursive thoughts. Otherwise, other techniques just to recognize, even if the thoughts are present for a moment, to refocus your attention on the substratum of the mind within which they're appearing, the subjective mind rather than the objective thoughts. Within this quiet of the mind, try to focus on the sense of the self and the way that the mind reacts to that, whether it believes that, assents to that, or whether there's present a consciousness that recognizes that it does not exist the way that it appears. Generally now, the self, the ego, its subtlemost form, as though existing inherently, appears to our consciousness, and our mind goes along with that, grasps to it as true. It apprehends it in such a manner as believing it, assenting to it, grasping to it. This ignorance, grasping to the inherent nature of a self, as though it's existing from its own side, this we've heard the Buddha explain is the root of our problem, the root of our circling and cyclic existence. From this ignorance, the sense of an ego assenting with it, going along with it, we easily develop attachment, hatred, jealousy, pride, all the other distorted states of mind, different viewpoints, by which we engage in actions, create karma that impel us to take rebirth in cyclic existence. Even we might engage in some virtuous activities on the basis of this sense of I, what we call contaminated virtue. But that's still being contaminated. It still impels us to be reborn in the upper realms of samsara, if it's throwing karma, to be experienced as some kind of pleasant relief within cyclic existence. This is what we've experienced since beginningless time, and we will continue to experience unless we can change the course of events. to actually escape from this vicious circle takes a very special methodology that the Buddha taught, basing ourselves on ethics to have a continuity of human rebirths, and as a basis for concentration, developing very firm, calm state of mind, and then using that, having heard much of the teachings, analyzed it, contemplated it, then to meditate on the supreme method to develop the wisdom of emptiness. While we've got this perfect human rebirth, it would be a shame not to begin this path, not to leave imprints in our mind, but just to escape from suffering, cyclic existence for ourselves alone would be very selfish, as each and every sentient being, even those who appear as enemies or as somehow repugnant to us, they all have been our mother numberless times. They all will be our mothers again, our dearest friends and companions numberless times in the future within cyclic existence. Everything changing, nothing definite. With a sense of affection for them, cultivated by recalling their kindness, not only as mother, but also in helping us to experience our negative karma, purify it quickly, supplying, even as strangers, all of the cooperative conditions we need to practice the path, the milk delivered to our door, the roads, the telephones. How kind sentient beings are while experiencing this suffering of the ocean of cyclic existence. I think I have to achieve a state where I can actually help them escape from suffering, not just heal them now of some illness or give them some food to satisfy their hunger now. That would never be able to repay the kindness that they've offered me in the past. I must attain a state of escape, of enlightenment, so that I can lead them all to that state, that very same state of enlightenment, free of all suffering, totally blissful, totally autonomous. So for that reason, as the very special ingredient to bring that enlightenment about is the understanding of emptiness, the wisdom of emptiness. I'm going to participate in the class on the Heart Sutra, listen, think, contemplate on what's being said for that purpose of getting closer to enlightenment for the welfare of all living beings. And then we'll recite the Heart Sutra, and we'll begin with the praise of the Mother, the wisdom gone beyond. La Madre. Ma sam je me shera parul jin ma ke mingat nam ke ngo So rang rik yeshe chu yul chen du sum galway yum la chak selo tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was residing on Massive Vulture's mountain in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tad yata gate gate para samgate bodhi svaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharitvati Putra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised. That's spoken by the Bhagavan. So, I suggested last time, if you had any questions, we could start off. Anyone have any queries, Frank? Oh, good. Okay.
It seems as though the Heart Sutra is taking a point of view of emptiness that's closer to the higher tenets. Is it the case that some of the lower schools don't accept the Heart Sutra, or do they just take a different interpretation of what it's saying?
So, can I ask you a question back? So by lower tenets, would you mean like the some of the tenets of the lesser vehicle, the Hinayana, like the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika?
That none of the aggregates have any substance.
Mm-hmm. So what do they accept as, maybe you remember from study of tenets, what do they accept as the Buddha's word?
Well, for example, the notion that that external phenomenon exist or don't exist at all.
Right, but I mean, what text do they rely on? Do they accept the Mahayana Sutras?
And that's what I'm not sure of. Like the Abhidharma Kosha, for example, and
Is that a Mahayana? Well, Abhidharma Kosha is not a sutra, right?
right.
Abhidharma Kosha is a text written by Vasubandhu. Who knows? Karen, do you know? Do the Vaibhashikas accept the... Frank, did you get it? Oh, that was you just scratching. Maureen? You know?
Well, in this book, there is a discussion about the Mahayana and the Hinayana view of the Heart Sutra.
I bet it does. I bet it doesn't talk about the Hinayana view of the Heart Sutra. It may talk about the Chittamatra and see if you can find while we're talking. In general, today the Hinayana is mainly represented by what school? Do you know? The Theravada. Yeah. By the way, I've mentioned this in other times. It's like in English when you see Theravada, it looks like you'd pronounce it Theravada, right? That TH is just an aspirated T, so it's not pronounced Thera, it's Terra, like an aspirated T, Theravada. The Theravada, that's a Pali word, is one of the Sanskrit schools, one of the Indian schools that also in the elaboration of things is called the Staiviravada. Staivira or Tera means elder. So it's a school of the elders. Sometimes they like to refer to it as the original Buddhism. Their canon, the canonical text, those things that they consider to be the official take on things are what is called the Tripitaka, right? Which is what the three baskets, the Sutra Pitaka, the Vinaya Pitaka, the Abhidharma Pitaka. And all of those that are part of the Theravada canon are called the Pali. Usually we call them the Pali canon because why? They were written in Pali, a language, a dialect of India at that time. And they in their tradition, they claim that the Buddha taught always in Pali. And so they don't accept, for many reasons, they don't accept the Mahayana Sutras, because the Mahayana Sutras that we have access to, most of them did not appear in written form when the Pali Canon was first written down. And for many reasons, some of them doctrinal, like Mahayana saying that phenomena are empty and that all sentient beings can attain enlightenment, and that the Buddha had attained enlightenment before he appeared in the world as the universal teacher. All of these many different kinds of things they would say, it would blow their mind. You know, they're completely it's just like people in Southern or Central California talking about George Bush. It's just like completely blows their mind apart. And are you Republicans? No. Yeah. Okay. Just I make jokes about George Bush sometimes. I probably was my mother probably last life. Oh my. So they don't accept the Heart Sutra because it's a Mahayana Sutra.
I know they don't accept the Abhidhamma Pitaka, but I wasn't sure what.
Well,
the
you're
Heart
talking
Sutra was
about,
part
that's
of.
one particular kind of thing. That's the, who doesn't accept the Abhidharma Pitaka? Do the Vaibhashikas accept they accept the Abhidharma Pitaka, don't they? They say it was actually written by Arhats. It was actually, who doesn't accept the Abhidharma Pitaka, the Hinayana schools? The Sautrantikas, one of the etymologies of Sautrantika, I remember, was the kind of the sense that the Buddha didn't teach an Abhidharma separate from the sutras, and everything could be found there, but these other texts, because they had all these mistakes in them, the 7 texts that are enshrined in the Vaibhashika Abhidharma Pitaka, and it's more or less that's what you find in the Theravada also. But that's another story. That's just talking about within their own Hinayana canon what is authentic or not. But they did not accept the Mahayana as the Buddha's word, as what Buddha actually taught. They thought it was invented by people later. So there's a very large study that's in Tibetan. I don't know what it would be in Sanskrit. In Tibetan we say Tekchen Kadup. Tekchen means Mahayana. Tekpa means Yana, and Chenpo means great Mahayana. Ka means speech, like the speech of the Buddha. Drup means to establish or to prove. So it's a subject that's found in the teachings of a lot of the great Mahayana masters, Indian masters, establishing the Mahayana as the actual teaching of Buddha, that Buddha actually taught Mahayana. It's not just spurious. Because this has been a debate that's gone on for centuries, millennia.
Are those Mahayana teachings part of one of the Tripitaka? Or
So the Mahayana teachings are all, there's a Mahayana Tripitaka. Like say, for instance, in the Tibetan tradition, we have those Sanskrit texts that were translated into Tibetan that the Buddha taught, the sutras and the Vinaya and those things on higher wisdom, and the Tantras, they're all called the what? The Kangyur. Ka, again, like Tekchen Kajup. Ka means speech, Gyur means translation. And then in the monasteries, like on one side of the altar there might be the Kangyur up high, and on the other side would be the Tengyur, the translation of the Indian pundits' commentaries to those. So all of those, there are similarities with some of the Theravada sutras. The Mahayana in general accepts the Theravada canon as Buddha's teachings, but again as skillful means, that they were not his final teaching. They were taught for people who had that inclination toward the lesser vehicle. So the Mahayana, in a sense, accepts both, although not many of the Hinayana canon were translated into Tibetan. Some of the texts that are of the Hinayana tradition that were translated, that were written in Sanskrit, translated into Sanskrit, or written in Sanskrit, were translated into Tibetan. But in general, most of that canon are all Mahayana sutras. Okay, so of the Mahayana sutras, there's many different kinds, like the Lankavatara Sutra and so forth, that are huge ones. They call them Mahavipulya, very huge sutras, like hundreds and thousands of shlokas, stanzas. And those sutras began to appear in the world sometime after the time of Christ. And the Theravada practitioners at the time had a big problem with that. They said, this is something invented now, which Buddha didn't say this. It's not in our canon. So they would not accept this as, none of the Hinayanas should, according to their tenets, accept this, but there are modern practitioners who follow the Dalai Lama, and they talk about emptiness. Some of them take tantric initiations. So you can't, just like when we study tenets, there's a difference between being a follower of a particular philosophical tenet. We might follow the Mahayana or follow the Prasangika, but we may actually be a practitioner, not even a practitioner of the Hinayana, because we don't even actually have renunciation. So there may be some of them that have good heart and a sense of compassion, but because of their karma, what they've studied and learned and believe in is a certain tenet system. And so sometimes nowadays they may make some kind of, sort of mixture, what the canonical teachings of the Theravada is, and mixing it up with some other Mahayana teachings. But in general, over the course of many, many centuries after the time of the Buddha, they were very separate. So although, are there any Hinayana practitioners appear in the Heart Sutra? What do you know? Shariputra, isn't he a bodhisattva? No, he's one of the two disciples of the Buddha. Again, many of the tankas, when you see Shakyamuni Buddha, on one side will be Shariputra, other side will be Maha Modgalyana, just as on either side of Lama Tsongkhapa as Gyaltsab-che and Kedrup-che, the two disciples. They say that I think all the universal teachers always have two main disciples. So they may have been emanations of Buddha, but they manifest being Shravakas as opposed to Pratika Buddhas. They were hearers, and they achieved arhatship in that lifetime, because at the end of the Buddha's life, when he passed away and there was the conclave to review the Buddha's teachings, everyone had attained arhatship. All of the main disciples had attained arhatship except Dorje. Except who? Ananda. And so, remember we talked about this before. So Ananda, by the skillful means of perhaps Kashyapya, I guess it was sort of teased and humiliated and said, you can't come until you achieve arhatship. You made all these mistakes. And so he sat down and he put the final touches on and achieved arhatship. And then he recited all of the sutras. Maybe not the Mahayana sutras. As you read Tendar Larampa's commentary, other commentaries, you see there's some doubt. In general, in the Mahayana, we kind of think that the Mahayana sutras may have been recited by some other bodhisattvas at in a different time. So this is not considered, not accepted by the Hinayana, by the Theravada. I mean, there might be some individuals who say, oh yes, I accept the Heart Sutra, but it's not part of it's something that's gone on for a long time. So this particular subject, I hope someday we could have a whole course on it, Tekchen Kadrup, establishing the Mahayana as the Buddha's teaching. Because sometimes when you encounter very strong adherents from Sri Lanka or Burma or Thailand, they might criticize the Mahayana and you might not know what to say. So it's good to know for instance, Shantideva had many arguments to explain in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. You can find several stanzas in some of his chapters to establish that the Mahayana was actually taught by Buddha. And Bhaviveka, one of the propounders of the, the autonomy school of the Majjhimika, was it Svatantrika Majjhimika? He also wrote very great texts that the Dalai Lama admires very much, and in those there's some sections where he establishes the Mahayana as the teachings of Buddha. Also texts of Nargajuna, passages in Nargajuna's texts that establish it, and Aryadeva and a couple of other, also the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara by Maitreya. There's a whole chapter called Tekchen Kadrup, establishing the Mahayana as the teaching of Buddha. So that's a very important subject. And in general, the Hinayana would say, no, sorry, this is full of mistakes. Buddha couldn't have said this because, as you said before, the phenomena are not inherently are inherently existent. The person doesn't exist, but the person is not substantially existent. But to all this is they wouldn't accept. Does that help? So, okay.
He makes quite a discussion of this, page 5 to 8.
8. Okay. Probably in another place also, yeah. Okay. Anyone else have? Yeah, Judith.
I have a question. Geshe Rabten described Avalokiteshvara, I think, as having a complete understanding of voidness, and then this book talks about him being a bodhisattva of the 10th bhumi. So I have trouble understanding how it was that at that moment he first understood the emptiness of the 5 aggregates.
I don't think it's at this moment that he suddenly sort of like, he suddenly realizes. Now, he realized before, but he's meditating on emptiness. Like, for instance, you may have realized the incredible value of the perfect human rebirth, or have a deep insight in impermanence, or the suffering nature of samsara, but you may be meditating on that in some time in the presence of someone else, and they might be asking you some question. It doesn't mean, it's the implication is not that he is, for the first time, realizing emptiness now. He's already an Arya. He's already realized emptiness before. When it says, and he beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature, it doesn't mean for the first time. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone else? Georgie, you have any question? Not yet. Yeah. Okay, maybe at tea break if you have any more. So let's continue a little bit along. So we're doing a combination of various kinds of commentary. I'm trying to explain in general as we go along, as according to our modern understanding of the Mahayana, and then we refer to Tendala Rampa's commentary, which is in this book, the Heart Sutra Explained, other places. If you read Tibetan, you can get the Tibetan commentary on the Heart Sutra, Jewel Illuminating the Meaning. And then we talk about some other things also. So we've mentioned this is called the Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom, or the Essence of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, the Arya Bhagavati. In the English translation, on the top line there, they didn't put the exalted, Bhagavati, Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. And we talked last time, thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain, sometimes called Vulture's Peak, in Rajagriha, together with a great Sangha of monks and a great Sangha of bodhisattvas. So in the commentaries they mention, did you read the section why it's called, that city is called Rajagriha? Rajagriha is the city, and then outside there's this special holy place of massive Vulture's Mountain. Do you remember? Venerable, why it's called? Judith, you were going, Why is it called Rajagriha?
Rajagriha was place of kings.
Yeah, the residence or the town of kings residence.
Because the king left his palace when it burned down and went to live there.
Yeah, I think there was some problem. This might sound familiar to you. People's houses were burning down in his town, and he said anyone whose house burns down has to move to this cemetery, build their house there. And then right after that, his palace burned down. Might have been a little bit embarrassing. So he moved there, and so it was that location, which is now Rajgir in India. Now they call it just Rajgir. Rajagriha is called, that's one of the reasons, supposedly, that's the etymology of that town. And then next to that is massive Vulture's Mountain, this very special holy place where the Buddha taught the Prajna Paramita Sutras, not just the Heart Sutra, all the other supposedly the other Prajnaparamita Sutras. What's that?
Oh, no, I was just wondering, the idea of this town, and it was the cemetery, and then they had Vulture's Peak there, and, the vultures that take care of the dead bodies. I don't know, just,
Right, and there's vultures all over India, right? Midian? There's vultures all over. It doesn't have to be, it's not just in the cemetery, also in the towns sometimes. Okay. So, a great community of monks, a great sangha of monks and a great sangha of bodhisattvas. So they give an etymology of the word sangha. What's the word sangha in Tibetan? Does anyone know? Do you know, Venerable? Gendun. The Tibetans took it as gewa means virtue, dumpa means to aspire. So aspirants of virtue, virtuous aspirants. But the word sangha traditionally from other of the Buddhist teachings, sometimes the word sangha just means group, but it says, let's see here, what's it, etymology. You can tell me where it is. Why they're called sangha is because they are, what? Because they cannot, this is from Chandrakirti's 70 stanzas on refuge. This is not the text that the Dalai Lama is teaching. What's the Dalai Lama teaching in Pasadena? 60 stanzas on reasoning, right? So this is another text, the 70 stanzas on refuge, but there's another text, this is by Chandrakirti. There's another text on emptiness, 70 stanzas by Nagarjuna. Here there's a famous verse that says, because they cannot be separated from the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha by billions of maras, translates to demons, it is called the Sangha. In this book 149, on the very last paragraph. Do you see that now? It's just a wee little thing on the middle there.
It's on 37 in this.
Oh yeah? Is that also on page 37? Probably in another place also, right? Okay. So I'm also on that page. So at that point he gives a note 24. Let's see what he said at that point. What did he say? You check the notes? In the Abhisamaya Alamkara Aloka, which is the light of the Abhisamaya Alamkara, it's a commentary by Haribhadra. He cites a verse to support an etymology apparently deriving from the Vedic Sanskrit. What does that mean, Venerable? Vedic Sanskrit? Is that a place?
I guess it's the language that the Vedas are recited in or spoken in.
Right. Okay. Do you know Vedic Sanskrit? The Vedas are the texts of ancient India that are held by the various Vedic schools. The word Hindu is sort of like a modern kind of word. There were many, many different philosophical schools. It kind of like comes from the Indus Valley. The religions of the people of India are called, they're called Hindu, but there are other kinds of religions also. So the Vedas were the ancient texts that were memorized by the Brahmins and handed down and supposedly had supreme knowledge. So they were written in a very precise Sanskrit that had particular rules. So that's what he says. He's taking an etymology apparently deriving from Vedic Sanskrit. Oh, so this is the wrong chapter. This is talking about Bhagavan. That's chapter 1. Sorry. Page 37, which chapter is that? The title? Is that the right place? The title? Oh, okay. Maybe that was the right place. The prologue?
In chapter 3, the prologue.
Oh, okay. So this is one of the things this is one of my pet peeves. I remember
Page 199.
okay, Harvey Horrocks, our dear friend Harvey Horrocks, who used to be the director of the central office, he said his pet peeve is people who don't know how to whisper. Do you know what that is? Like in a big crowd when you're supposed to be quiet and someone's saying, "Hey, can you pass me some?" Instead of whispering. And one of my pet peeves is the people who put the notes, the footnotes at the end of the chapters according to chapter, you know, like 1 to 20 and then 1 to 32, instead of just going 1 to 500. It's so easy to find otherwise. It's one of my pet peeves. I have to get over that. I won't be able to achieve realization until I overcome that. What is it?
That note just tells you which line it is in the 70 stanza.
Okay, so it doesn't tell anything about the etymology there. Okay. So this is a famous verse, and it's kind of explaining a meaning. Somehow the etymology of the word Sangha in Sanskrit has the implication of individuals who can't be separated from something, in this case the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, by any kind of outside forces, such as the Maras. So they are those who are, also, as the Tibetans took the etymology, intent on virtue. Okay, so that's the word here that's being translated here as community.
So you mean this idea of being joined together is not being joined together with other people, but being joined together with the objects of refuge?
Means that they are, here, we'll read the verse first. Because they, means the Sangha, cannot be separated from the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha by billions of demons, it is called Sangha. So it's giving an etymology of the word Sangha. They can't be separated from the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So they are a community that's kind of close-knit. It's not just like a community, but it has a particular kind of rationale behind it, that they can't be separated from the Buddha particularly, and the Dharma, his teachings, and the other Sangha, even by outside Maric forces. So at that time, this is what's called the prologue, right, to the sutra. Is this called the common prologue or the uncommon prologue? Do you know? Did you read in the commentary? Venerable? No one's read. I thought you all. I have to give homework to you. Did you read, Mark?
No, but I cheated. It's the common prologue.
So up to how far is the common prologue?
I haven't cheated that far yet.
You haven't cheated enough to know. Okay, so. Okay, so maybe this first paragraph is common. Well, you check. Some of you can check. So at that time, the Bhagavan, this is referring to Buddha, the Bhagavan is not just the Lord, it's someone who has not everyone is called a Bhagavan. Not any of the Buddha's disciples are called Bhagavan. Only the Buddha is called Bhagavan. The Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration that is the Sanskrit word samadhi that you know, Tingne Zen, on the categories of phenomena, the various kinds of conventional phenomena. And this samadhi was called profound perception. So the implication, although it's not explained here, the implication is that while perceiving conventional reality, the categories of phenomena, the Buddha was able to perceive their profound nature as being empty of true existence. Can anyone else have that kind of samadhi? Doesn't sound like it, because only the Buddhas are capable of perceiving the two levels of truth at the same time, the conventional truth. Is that true? Can't you perceive emptiness and conventional phenomena at the same time? Why not? He's actually thinking. In case you're wondering. Or maybe not, I'm not sure. Is he? Are you thinking?
I just closed my eyes.
Oh, he just closed his eyes. I thought he was thinking. Okay, while he's thinking, anyone else have an idea? Judith, do you know? The question is, can anyone other than a Buddha, can't some other people, can't Arya Bodhisattvas perceive the two levels of truth at the same time?
No.
Why not?
I don't know why.
I think in general it's possible, but that you can't perceive it with one mind. You might have one sort of one part of your mind understanding, recalling emptiness. You can't realize it directly while you're realizing conventional phenomena anyway, because if you have a direct realization of emptiness in meditative equipoise, no conventional phenomena are going to appear at all. But you can have a remembering consciousness of emptiness, like when you make dedication and so forth. Even while you're making the conventional dedication, or when you're giving, your eyes are open, you're not in meditative equipoise. Even Arya Bodhisattva will not be on meditative equipoise on emptiness necessarily. They might be entering into equipoise and rising, or they can just have a remembering consciousness of emptiness while they're doing the conventional thing. So you can have, in general, you can kind of realize the two levels of truth, but like in Tantra, when we talk, the special feature of Tantra is that there are methods which can help you to emulate that, the Buddha's realization of directly realizing the two levels of truth with one consciousness. So those of you who studied Tantra with Kirti Sencha Rinpoche last summer, you kind of have an idea of what that's talking about. So the Buddha's in this very special kind of concentration, and he's just sitting there. He's not speaking. He's not sort of apparently paying attention to the conversation, but he knows what's going on. And Shariputra, one of the two disciples of Buddha, and Avalokiteshvara are inspired by the Buddha's presence and samadhi. Remember I mentioned to you in many of the sutras there are instances when the arhats, would go into town begging. Just by their presence, their minds would be calmed and there'd be less problems in town. When the Buddha went begging, even for miles around, everyone's mind was just sort of like, kind of blissful, and they're just by the presence of his holy body, speech, and mind. So here, this is something even more direct. The Buddha is sitting in meditative concentration, obviously, and as it says here also, at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom. So that means he was thinking about it. Looked upon is the Tibetan word tawa, which means viewed. He viewed it or was thinking about it. The profound perfection of wisdom. And he beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So, is this still part of the prologue? This is like the unique or uncommon prologue, right? Tumong Mayimba. Remember the word we had? Uncommon or unique. So, what does this mean? He beheld those five aggregates. Which five aggregates? It says those. It sounds like the referred to before. Which five aggregates was he beholding? Beholding. His own? All sentient beings aggregates? Maybe he was beholding his own. Why? What is the view of selflessness of the Hinayana in general? Frank, I'm going to give that back to you because you're our resident expert tonight on emptiness, on lower tenets. What is the Hinayana view of selflessness?
The Hinayana view of selflessness. I'm losing it.
That phenomena are empty? What? Maybe Diana will give it a try.
I can't give an exact definition right now, but phenomena, they say, do truly exist, but the self, the I doesn't inherently exist.
The person is empty of true existence? Right, they say... No, not of self-cognizing. The person is empty of being a self-supporting, substantially existent entity, right? Something that, as appears to our mind, is not the subtlest way that the I seems to appear, but it is an erroneous way the I seems to be appearing as something that is substantial in the sense of being self-supporting and not just imputed to a collection of parts. They say that the person is imputed to the collection of the 5 aggregates, right? But still, even then, Lama Tsongkhapa, especially others, it's not really clear in the sutras. It seems that even then, even though they say the person is imputed to the 5 aggregates, they don't say that other phenomena are imputed to their parts. They say that the aggregates themselves upon which the person is imputed do exist. Come on. Maybe there's no person within there the way that the mind thinks, the ego. All there is the 5 aggregates, they say, and those really exist. Does that make sense, Tenzin? The 5 aggregates, the body, what are the 5 aggregates? The body, the eye, the ear, and the nose. What are the 5 aggregates? Form aggregate, that means the body. Feeling. Discrimination. Compositional factors, consciousness. So those 5 elements are the things that make up our being. Even beyond those, it seems like there's something else, a soul or a self that seems to be independent of them in our mind, self-supporting, substantially existent, like almost as on an equal footing with the aggregates, as though it's as the aggregates were salesmen and it's the chief salesman. This is sometimes or the chief trader. There are many traders. I don't mean stock market. I mean like in salesman. So that's in the Hinayana. That's the view of selflessness. They don't talk about emptiness to any extent as is found in the Mahayana Sutras. The word emptiness, shunyata, appears in the Pali Canon just a few places, but the Buddha was referring to a different kind of emptiness. So here, the implication is that Avalokiteshvara, Arya Avalokiteshvara, was meditating on emptiness, not just the emptiness of the person, even subtler than the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. Not just that, but he was meditating on the emptiness of the aggregates, the basis upon which we label the person. Say Louise is a person that you might say, where's Louise? We might think, Louise is a particular kind of thing out there. We might associate Louise sometime with her body or her mind or her feelings, but there's a sense that Louise is existing out there somewhere. If we understand selflessness, we could understand that Louise is just a name that we impute to those aggregates, the body and these other of the 5 aggregates. But we might be left with a feeling, well, at least there's something there. The body exists. Maybe there's no real Louise the way that my mind conceives or the way that her mind conceives of herself, but at least there is a real body, there's real mind. So here, Avalokiteshvara was meditating on the emptiness of the 5 aggregates also, not just the emptiness of the person. So this is kind of distinguishing his meditative state from the meditative state of the Hinayana Arhats and the Hinayana Aryas as they meditate. Because they mainly, although eventually they have to realize emptiness of true existence, they may not put emphasis at all on the emptiness of other phenomena. Here he's saying, the sutra says, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So generally you would say you beheld the person as empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, or from a Mahayana point of view, from a Madhyamika point of view, the person is empty of inherent existence. But here, not only the person, but even the aggregates, the basis upon which you label the person, is being recognized. Everything is empty. We'll see later on. The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, everything is empty of true existence. So with that quandary, why don't we take a little break? So let's continue. Now, you might have come up with some more questions since, got some hum there, since the beginning. Venerable has a question. Good.
Is the prologue, and the uncommon prologue?
I thought you were saying something as the crow flies.
Sorry.
The prologue.
The common prologue is just the very beginning part. Is the uncommon one the remainder of the sutra?
What do you think? What's a prologue generally mean? She said the common prologue is just the beginning. Thus did I hear up to what? The Buddha was in this particular concentration? Or no? Where does the common prologue finish? Pardon? So that's the common one is just the general setting of the scene, and uncommon is this particular situation. The Buddha was in this, so that where it says at that time the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration, that's the beginning of the uncommon. And how far does that go? Judith, you have some insight in it?
Until those five aggregates also are empty of inherent existence.
So just the end of the second paragraph in our translation. So that's kind of that's what's happening. So the Avalokiteshvara is, Buddha is meditating, and also Avalokiteshvara is meditating, but sort of in contemplation, because he's not having it looks like he's viewing, that means that he's meditating on the meaning of emptiness conceptually. So this is, up till there is the uncommon prologue, is sort of setting the scene. Okay? So the common one is like at the beginning of all of the sutras. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling somewhere together with this many monks and this many lay people or something. In the Mahayana Sutras, sometimes it mentions, remember I mentioned before, sometimes it mentions a certain number of monks in the Sangha, which were, if you count up the monks that the Buddha converted from the disciples of one rishi and from another, there's a certain number that's traditionally mentioned. So sometimes you see a number. Generally it means all of them. Okay, so some other question? Yeah, Diana.
In the first paragraph where it says categories of phenomena, is that just referring to all of conventional reality, or are there specific lists that it's referring to of categories of phenomena?
What do you think? Categories of phenomena. It's a hard one to translate. I think Venerable Dreame was asking me about this word. Do you remember? Paryaya? Weren't you asking me about this one day? In Tibetan we say Chuki Namdang. Namdang can mean synonyms, or it can mean categories. It's something that comes up in a lot of the sutras when you categorize things. So I think what it means is he was thinking about all phenomena in all of their various manifestations: sounds, sights, smells, tastes, objects of mind. The Buddha was. And so the Buddha's mind is capable, from the Mahayana perspective, of perceiving all phenomena at one time, all the various categories of phenomena at one time. Our minds wouldn't be capable of doing that. Okay, someone else? Judith.
From what you were talking about before the break about the Hinayana view of emptiness, and then that Avalokiteshvara was saying that he saw also that the aggregates were empty. So to me that sounds like up until then, did the Buddha only teach the Hinayana view, and this kind of blew everybody's minds?
No, I don't think so. First of all, we probably wouldn't say the Hinayana view of emptiness, although you could kind of stretch it. Generally, you don't find the word emptiness used so much in the Hinayana Sutras. You find in the Four Noble Truths, there are four aspects of the first truth of suffering, that suffering phenomena are what? Do you know? Suffering, impermanent, empty, and selfless. And according to some interpretations, empty means emptiness, but generally what that doesn't mean emptiness. It means they are empty of something grosser than emptiness. So in general, in the Hinayana scriptures, what's obviously taught is that persons are empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent. That there is no real kind of person the way that our mind imagines, that the person is just something which is designated. But it doesn't go into detail and then talking about other phenomena outside the person, such as the person's own body and mind. It's almost as though those things are real, but the self is imaginary, the self that we imagine, the soul that we conceive of, that motivates us, that causes us to get angry or causes us to aspire after things. Even aspire after emptiness at the beginning, aspire for enlightenment or emptiness, understanding emptiness or nirvana. Even that conception of the self is erroneous. It might motivate us to create virtuous karma. It's called contaminated virtue. Whereas the Buddha, when he taught the Mahayana, and it's said that he taught the Mahayana soon after achieving enlightenment. The first teaching he taught, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, was to how many disciples, do you remember? In Deer Park, 5 disciples who had spent the 6 years in asceticism with the Buddha. And he mainly taught the Hinayana view of things, the first turning of the wheel, that all phenomena are truly existent, but the self is not self-supporting, substantially existent. That's kind of the main point there. This is something that we study in tenets a little bit, although the people who just studied tenets probably have forgotten. Because they were asking the same questions. The Buddha also turned the wheel of Dharma, also taught the Mahayana. And for instance, in the commentary of Tendalampa, there's doubt about when the Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom sutras. He taught emptiness and other Mahayana sutras which talked about emptiness, because there were many bodhisattvas from other universes who already knew about emptiness from previous lives and who had been maybe residing in Pure Lands and so forth. So it's not as though this was something that was never heard of before by the bodhisattvas, but when the Buddha was teaching those who were hearing it for the first time, when he turned the second wheel of Dharma, it not necessarily mean at a second time, at a later time, but indeed it probably was somewhat later. But that turning of the wheel extended over many, many decades. As the first turning of the wheel, there are many incidences of teachings that can be categorized as the first turning of the wheel, in which the Buddha mainly taught that phenomena are truly existent. The second turning of the wheel is all phenomena are not truly existent. The third turning of the wheel, Buddha taught, among other things, he taught some phenomena are truly existent and others are not. So those are the basis of some of the teachings of the mind-only school. So Mahayana, this second and third turning of the wheels, mainly Mahayana teachings. So it was when the hearers, like Shariputra, those who were more advanced, happened to come to the Mahayana Sutras, as is here, they were kind of blown away. They blew their mind. When I said at later times when the Mahayana began to be promulgated in the world after the Buddha's death, and first the Hinayana was established, the Mahayana kind of went underground because it was something more esoteric. The Buddha did not teach it as openly to people. So when it was memorized kept in the minds of yogis and yoginis and the tantrikas. Later, when they began to write it down and the sutras were circulated when the time was right, maybe around the time of Nagarjuna, when he also began to explain the Mahayana sutras, which were already existed in the world but were not known so much, especially to the Hinayana, that blew their mind. You know, they thought, wow, what is this? You're just inventing this. This is not what the Buddha said, that all phenomena are empty. He said that the aggregates do exist. It's just that the person is imaginary. The person that we imagine to be substantially existent doesn't exist. Okay? So we'll talk more about that as time goes on. So in this context, when Avalokiteshvara was looking upon those 5 aggregates also, kind of the implication of also is not only was he looking at the self and understanding it as being empty of something. In this case, it's talking about something very subtle, empty of inherent nature. But even the aggregates, the body and mind that we think of as mine, because when we meditate on emptiness, sometimes we begin with, in terms of actual realization, it said, the first taste you have of emptiness is realizing the emptiness of the self. Here I'm using the words from a Mahayana perspective, that the self that seems to be in your mind, as we were meditating in our motivation at the beginning, the self that seems to be there, you know, that is so obvious when you're criticized, or when you're praised, or when strong attachment rises. That self, which is actually motivating them, but becomes more apparent in dynamic situations like that. That self doesn't exist at all. It's just like a mirage, like seeing a reflection in the mirror. Every day you come into your house and you think you have a roommate for years. Every time you walk in your house, your darn roommate is always walking in on their side of the house, and you always avoid them. You always think there's a roommate there. At some point, someone tells you there is no roommate there at all. It's just there's something that's appearing, but that is not what you think it is. And you think, oh, come on, listen, I know that. It's so vibrant. She always wears the same clothes I wear. That really annoys me. And she puts on, if I put on new makeup, get new glasses, she does the same thing. And I've had it. I've fed up with her. And someone tells you that's an illusion, that would come as a great relief to you, especially if it was causing you a problem, right? At first, it might come, it depends on your point of view. If you were not prepared, you might be kind of disappointed and afraid if someone told you that roommate didn't exist. You might think, oh, my roommate, you know, they love me. When I look at them, they look at me. When I smile, they smile at me, you know. So at first, when we meditate on selflessness, there can be some fear arising because we're so believing in this, we might think, I will disappear, I won't exist at all if this self, that when I point here, this, because it kind of appears as though the seat of the self can be found as though in the mind, and usually the grasping takes place in the subtle mind at the heart chakra, so often we point like this. Would the Chinese point, when you talk about me, or is it Japanese? Japanese, and the me, they always point to the nose. So Avalokiteshvara was here meditating the way that the bodhisattvas do, not simply on the emptiness of the self, but on this emptiness of phenomena, including the self. So it says he was meditating on the, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature, not just the self. But again, in the Hinayana tradition, they don't talk about the self being empty of inherent nature. What do they believe? What do they meditate on? Self is empty of?
Self-supporting, substantially existent.
Of being self-supporting, substantially existent, right. So this is, even that view of the self's emptiness is more subtle in the Mahayana, but also the basis. So when we meditate on emptiness, you know, the first time we have a little sense that the I may not exist. At least we're told that. And we say, what if I let go of that? How does Judith exist? I, Judith, am just a name. The conventionally existent phenomena Judith is only a concept. That is like a mind boggler at first, because it seems so obvious that the I is something really findable there. Matthew in the mind, I, Matthew, exist. I, George, I, Dreame, exist. So once one begins to have some kind of understanding of that through analysis, as when Rinpa Rinpoche was teaching, when we studied a little bit in tenets and we'll study a bit here now, why that self that seems to be appearing there could not exist that way. That's where one uses logic. Okay, the reasoning, such as the 60 stanzas of reasoning that His Holiness will teach in Los Angeles or Pasadena. The reasonings that prove that, then when you understand, like someone has explained to you, that's not your roommate. There's no roommate there. That's your reflection. It appears as a person, but it is empty of being a real person. So once you realize that, and then you can let go of the sense of this roommate you'd always believed in, there would be a sense of vacuity in your mind, only negating that roommate, not implying anything else in its place. That would be kind of like an understanding of the selflessness. Later, when the reflection appeared, by the force of your meditation on selflessness, on emptiness of that it doesn't really exist that way, you would kind of see it more as an illusion. The same way in the waking state, someone who's meditated on selflessness of person, when they arise from that, the I still appears. It's not like the I disappears. The I, the sense of I is still there, but now you start to see it more and more like a reflection, like a dream. Like in a dream, everything seems so real sometimes, right? You're chased by the dogs, or some of you recognize that, or there's you've finally gotten a date with Richard Gere, or I don't know, or in a dream, or you failed your final exam again and again, always in the dream, or it's the exam's tomorrow and you haven't studied, and the dream is like that, and you wake up afraid, and then, it's just a dream. When you realize that, the content of what you were perceiving before and your mind was grasping to, you realize is empty of that reality your mind was attributing to it, right? So that's another example the Buddha gave to illustrate, an example to illustrate emptiness, selflessness. Phenomena are like an echo, because an echo sounds like someone's, I say, you're stupid. Then a couple of minutes later it comes back, you're stupid. And it sounds like it's being said to me. It's my own speech. Echo, reflection, mirage, illusion, magician's illusion. What did I just say? Dream. A Karen. You know what a Karen is? Am I pronouncing it? Karen? This pile of stones, like in England. How do you say it? Karen, yeah. Not Karen, like the girl's name. Cairn. Karen. Karen. Ah, I get that. We get the right. Karen. Okay, there we go. Good Scottish, correct Scottish pronunciation. What's a Karen, Venerable?
Kieran Barnes, I don't know actually.
Oh, I thought you. Okay.
I've heard it, but it's Kieran.
In the distance, a pile of stones is used to demarcate fields.
It's like hills, I think. Kieran Gorms are a set of hills.
Okay, maybe hills, but a pile of stones that used to demarcate the boundaries of your property, from the distance might appear to be a person. So you have this concept that's a person, but when you get closer and you analyze it up close, you realize it is empty of being a person. I think I told you the story before when I was doing retreat in New Mexico a couple of years ago. It happened 2 or 3 times. I thought I saw these dogs down the trail that I was going to take a walk on, and I thought, well, I better be on my guard. They might be, I don't know if they're wild dogs. And when I came close, it was a water pump and 2 little logs sticking out of the ground or something like that. I said, wow, that's amazing. From the distance, it looked like these dogs who were waiting down there. The next time I went walking, again, I saw these dogs. I forgot that I had already analyzed. So it was like I hadn't really It's like, at first when you meditate on emptiness, you may even forget. It still appears and you believe it the next time. So you have to meditate again and again and recognize that. Okay, so that's kind of the context here. Also, at that time, while the Buddha was engaged in this very particular concentration, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, remember we talked why these two epithets are used. You could call him just a Bodhisattva, or you could call him a Mahasattva. And in the various commentaries, sometimes Bodhi means one thing and Sattva means another, but here, from one point of view, a very nice way in a sense, Bodhisattva kind of emphasizes the aspiration for Bodhi, enlightenment, where Mahasattva kind of emphasizes for the welfare of all, Maha. It doesn't have to be only that interpretation, but that they don't necessarily have a different meaning. Like in the long mantra of Avalokiteshvara, do you ever say the 100-syllable mantra? Namo Ratnatrayaya, Nama Aya Gana Sagara, Vairochana Vuhara Chaya Tathagataya Arate Samyak Samarataya Ta Om. Doesn't it come Bodhisattva Mahasattva somewhere there? So you can use many mantras, you find Bodhisattva Mahasattva. So it's kind of, in this context of the Heart Sutra, although in some tantric contexts or something else, it might have some different meaning. Here it's just a difference of emphasis. It's just saying that Avalokiteshvara was a great being, a bodhisattva, who had the welfare of all sentient beings in mind. He was an Arya being, as Don is very well versed and has mentioned many times. An Arya being is someone who's realized emptiness directly. He's called Avalokiteshvara. The etymology of Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezik, means one who looks down upon the world out of mercy. The Lord who looks down, Ishvara, Avalokita, sometimes. Avalokiteshvara means the Lord who looks down upon the world. He looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom. So this is not just the higher training in wisdom that's found in the Hinayana. Remember when we talk about higher training of wisdom, remember what that was, Diana? Lakpa Sharabki, the training of higher wisdom we had in our...
Enunciation already, so
Yeah, it's called higher training, but it mainly, from the Hinayana point of view, it's not talking about the Bodhisattva's practice of the perfection of wisdom. Here, that perfection of wisdom is especially emphasizing not just the emptiness of the person, the selflessness of the person, but the emptiness of all phenomena. So Avalokiteshvara was thinking about that. Of the 6 perfections, he was meditating on the perfection of wisdom, or the wisdom gone beyond. We could translate either way, right? Prajna paramita. Prajna, wisdom. Paramita could mean gone beyond, could mean perfection. How do you say in Chinese, paramita? Do you know? Okay, you haven't studied that much in the Chinese tradition. I thought maybe you know. Venerable? Did you have yeah?
In order to be the perfection of wisdom, does it have to be imbued with the bodhisattva attitude?
It has to be imbued with, it has to be conjoined with conventional bodhicitta to be the perfection of wisdom. It can't be just a practice of meditating on emptiness, because according to Chandrakirti, even the hearers and solitary realizers realize emptiness. Although they emphasize the selflessness of the person, they realize the final subtle object of negation of that. Not just the person is empty of self-supporting substantial existence, but the person is empty of inherent existence. Otherwise, there'd be no way for them, that wisdom, to overcome the afflictions, the klesha. That's the point of view of Chandrakirti, and there's some debate about that. If you read some of this, then Kargu and other commentaries on Chandrakirti, they have some different take on that, but that's generally what Chandrakirti himself said. So this is the uncommon context, the uncommon prologue. So the Buddha was sitting in this and in meditative absorption, absorbed in the concentration. That means mind completely concentrated on this particular samadhi, where he, in a sense, all conventional phenomena seem to be appearing, and he's realizing their emptiness at the same time with one mind, so that only the Buddha can do that. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara was looking upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom. He was contemplating this, and he beheld, he was analyzing the five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So the body is empty of inherent nature. What's another way of saying that? There is no inherently existent body. Or, in short, you could say there's no body. In the context of saying there's no inherent existent body, there's no inherently existent feelings, there's no inherently existent discrimination, no inherently existent compositional factors, no inherently existent consciousness, then you can go on and say there is no eye, no ear, no nose. The implication being, because of the context, as you'll see later, is not saying that the I doesn't exist at all. What Avalokiteshvara was saying is the I does not inherently exist. When he said there's no I, he means there's no inherently existent I. There's no inherently existent ear. Do you follow? So when this prayer was meditated on, when we get a chance, when the teachings go on, when the Dalai Lama's teaching in Pasadena and the Heart Sutra is recited at first, you can meditate on the meaning of emptiness. That makes it profound. Just saying the words is helpful, but that's not going to eliminate a lot of obstacles from your mind.
Why is it that only Buddhas can realize the two truths simultaneously?
Why is it? Because until the state of Buddhahood, when one meditates on emptiness directly, when one mind is meditating on emptiness directly, only emptiness can appear to that mind due to the subtle obstructions to omniscience, called the shedip, we call shedip, or jnana avarana. Those are what are removed by practicing the Bodhisattva path. That's not the only obstruction to omniscience, there are others.
Is that the final obscuration that's removed before attaining enlightenment?
Well, there are other, for instance, another obscuration to enlightenment is the obscuration that prevents us from perceiving all infinite phenomena simultaneously. So all conventional phenomena simultaneously. So that, obviously that's removed too. A lot of, the final obscuration to omniscience is not only that, but on the last moment of the Vajra-like meditation, equipoise, on the 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva, actually can enter into meditation on emptiness and then arise from that and perceive conventional phenomena many, I don't know, I can't count it, millions of times in a snap of a finger, I don't know how, just, very, very fast. So they're almost like a Buddha, but they're not perceiving conventional phenomena and the ultimate nature of those phenomena with that one mind simultaneously. They have to alternate between the two because they have not eliminated that final, the obstructions, all the obstructions to omniscience. And the way to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience is not merely by meditating on emptiness. Otherwise, the hearers and solitary realizers would eliminate those obscurations, right? There has to be kind of like in kitchen lingo, maybe Tenzin with it. So it's not just enough to have the scouring pad. You need to have the scouring powder. So the scouring powder in this case is like bodhicitta, maybe, or vice versa, and the pad is like maybe the wisdom of emptiness. So the combination of the two are able to eliminate the finest stains from the mind. Bodhicitta alone cannot eliminate even the obstructions to liberation, let alone by itself. Just having good heart and a wish to attain enlightenment for all sentient beings, selflessly acting, as we know from the Jataka tales or from the story of Christ. Just acting in that way alone would not bring one to enlightenment. But we don't know what's in the Bodhisattva's mind or in Christ's mind. Maybe also the realization of emptiness. Conjoined with the Bodhisattva's activities and that practicing the first 5 perfections, when they're conjoined with the wisdom of emptiness, the combination of the two accumulate merit and wisdom and allow one to actually, and on the end, and the last 3 bhumis, the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, they're called the pure bhumis, one eliminates the obstructions to omniscience. This is according to the higher philosophical school of Prasangika. Okay. So we've kind of, in a sense, we've kind of finished the common and uncommon prologues, or unique prologue. Now the actual situation starts. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this, the following, to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. Through the power of Buddha, it doesn't mean necessarily the Buddha was kind of sending, say this. It might be, but that's not necessarily, it's just, the Buddha knew, because of everything he'd cultivated in the past with these individuals, he knew what was going to happen, and this was his blessing. Also, he sat in this way now so that this would happen. I don't think necessarily means that he's sending out some rays to kind of cause them to say these things. Do you see what I mean? The power of the Buddha, the blessings of Buddha. Yeah, he knew what was going to be said before, and he arranged things so that it would be said in that way. Here the word power is kind of like the magical power, tu in Tibetan. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra, who was one of the arhats, I think, did it say in the commentary that Shariputra had become an arhat already at this time? Or was it talking about another one of the arhats? Did anyone read ahead? Someone should read. Diana, you have a chance to read?
He was regarded as a Shravaka arhat.
Yeah, he was certainly at the later, but there's some in Tenda Larampa's commentary. There's some analysis of who was already an arhat at the time the Prajnaparamita Sutra was taught. I think he was talking about one of the other arhats, maybe Subhuti. There was some indication because Subhuti had attained arhatship at this time or that time. So Shariputra was supposed to be the best in wisdom, especially in the Abhidharma, Hinayana teachings. So that's kind of like the flavor here. He's asking Avalokiteshvara, how did the bodhisattvas, what does he say? Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. Hey, how should any son of the lineage train? How should they practice? Those who wish to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom. So here, sometimes this term son of the lineage, sometimes people translate that. They say, oh, in Sanskrit that just means son of good family. It's just like a nice way. Do you ever hear that when you go back to India? Some kind of phrase like that? Here, there's a very particular meaning. When it talks about the Mahayana lineage. So someone who is a son or daughter of the lineage, it doesn't mean someone who's born to a good family, like, Brahmin caste or born in Texas oil or something like that. Excuse me, I have to get off of this. Son of the lineage means someone who has awakened or entered into the Mahayana lineage. What does that mean, having entered into the Mahayana lineage? Maybe generated bodhicitta. How do you awaken the Mahayana lineage? Do you know? When you've developed great compassion an individual who's developed great compassion for sentient beings within their continuum is someone who's said to have awakened the Mahayana lineage. So son of the lineage means like any, so what son of the Mahayana, what fellow who is a Mahayana practitioner, what should they do if they want to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? Now, when the Dalai Lama taught the Heart Sutra in Shoreline a couple of years ago, some of you were there, he was going from another version of the sutra which is found, this is the version that's found, that we usually recite, that's found in the prayer books. In the sutra version, even Shariputra is saying, what should any son or daughter of the lineage train? How should they train who wish to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? Here, in this version that we have, it just says son, as though in the Hinayana tradition, generally it says to become an arhat, you have to be a male. And I remember a couple of years ago in Singapore, one of the Theravada monks, Venerable, at that conference, I'll be going in this June, one of the monks, he even came up to the stage and is actually from Australia, nice, very intelligent guy. I think he'd gone to Oxford. He said, the root of the Dharma is the Bhikshu Sangha, and only you have to be a bhikshu to become an arhat. So there's some tenets like that you find in the Hinayana. So sometimes in the Hinayana, some interpretation of it can be very patriarchal. So that's kind of the implication in this version of the sutra. Kind of Shariputra is kind of saying, just, what's the word? Assuming that you're only talking about men. How should any son of the lineage practice? But when His Holiness taught in Shoreline, he was reading from a sutra where even at that point, so there might be various versions, even at that point, Shariputra was saying any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage. But there is this tradition like this. Tenzin?
Do sons and daughters of the lineage still become arhats, or is that club no longer existent?
Do sons of the lineage or daughters of, so if we talk about the Mahayana lineage,
Things to become arhat, or is this degenerate time bumming you out for that too?
What would you think?
Sounds pretty unattainable.
What?
that so son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage of a bodhisattva
The actual attainment.
So actually the word arhat
has many different levels of meaning. One of our dear friends, teachers, Dobun Tuku, who used to direct the center in the Library of Tibetan Works in the Tibet House in Delhi. He used to live in Dharamsala when Geshe Dargay was there. Dobun Tuku wrote an article for one of the big journals once on the meaning of arhat. And because sometimes the Buddha is called the arhat. When we say, Tongba Chomdende Dejin Shekpa Da Chomba, when we were saying the praise or it means the arhat, the Tathagata. There it doesn't mean that he was a simple arhat. The arhat can mean destroyed all the foes, all of the delusions and the imprints, the subtle obstructions to omniscience. So generally, bodhisattvas don't achieve arhatship, they achieve enlightenment. If you talk about the final goal, arhatship meaning the Hinayana goal of eliminating from the mind all of the delusions, but not the subtle obstructions to omniscience. Just the delusions that propel us within samsara. Those can be eliminated from the mind, and one can achieve a state in which one will not take rebirth in samsara without choice, as we do now. We don't have any choice. Whether we might say, I'm not going to be reborn, I've decided. Or like sometimes people say, I've decided I'm not going to get angry anymore. I've become a Buddhist. It's not something you can you can decide, but the mind has its own power, right? You follow? So when the arhats achieve nirvana and they pass away from bodily form, their mind stream continues in that state for a long period of time, not taking rebirth in samsara. They've achieved a state beyond samsara. This is one of the etymologies of nirvana, passed beyond sorrow. But they will be awakened, according to the Mahayana philosophy, Mahayana tenets. They will be awakened after many eons of that blissful samadhi by the Buddhas. He said the Buddhas snapped their fingers. I'm not sure. It must be a special way. And they awaken from that samadhi, and the Buddhas inform them that they have not eliminated all the faults from their mind. And they are then impelled to take rebirth in samsara again, not out of karma and delusion, as we are without control, but out of choice by the power of aspiration and prayer, and some karma which is still within their mind stream. They take rebirth, as the bodhisattvas take rebirth. And then they enter in and they eventually achieve enlightenment. So there's achievement of arhatship, and then there's a long gap, and then they enter back into the world and strive on the bodhisattva path until they achieve enlightenment. When the bodhisattvas start from the very beginning and don't diverge into don't fall into the Hinayana path, they continue on the bodhisattva path. Once they reach the end of the 7th bhumi, the beginning of the 8th bhumi, they could be called, and they are called in some scriptures, Mahayana arhats. Why is that? Do you know? Yeah, they've eliminated all of the klesha, all of the obstructions to liberation, so they're sometimes called Mahayana arhats. And then you could call Buddha arhat when they achieve final state. So in general, bodhisattvas, it's possible for a bodhisattva to fall from the bodhisattva path at the very beginning, before their bodhicitta has become immutable. But at a certain point, it becomes unchangeable. In the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the 100,000, 8,000, 25,000 verse Prajnaparamita, it talks about, I think, 22 types of bodhicitta. And the first one, I think, is called earth-like bodhicitta. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all 20.
I was going to say, if I was you, just get one.
Just one, oh, okay. The second one is called gold-like bodhicitta. In the second part of the path of accumulation, the bodhicitta has become immutable, like gold. You know, like gold, even you change the shape, if you melt it, you still have pure gold again. It's immutable. So that's the example, gold-like bodhicitta. So the example of, for instance, Shariputra, I've mentioned in other classes before the story of Shariputra, who's the individual in the sutra here. It's said in the sutras, Mahayana sutras, that in many, many eons before, Shariputra was a bodhisattva. And that he was only on the first part. There's 3 parts to the path of accumulation. He was on the smallest part, where the bodhicitta had not yet stabilized. And some Mara appeared as a Brahmin and asked him for his right hand. He needed it for some ritual to save himself, and he meditated, he thought, all these lifetimes I've cherished the body. This is Shariputra thinking. It wasn't called Shariputra at that time, this is many lives before. And now I'm going to use this body for the welfare of others. So he cut off his hand, but at this point he not only didn't have stabilized bodhicitta, but he hadn't realized emptiness, so there was great pain. So he had to do it with great caution. So he handed the right hand to the demon, appearing as a Brahmin, and the Brahmin looked at him and said, "How dare you hand me something with your left hand? How insulting." Because in India, you use your left hand to wipe your bottom. You never would offer something with your left hand, right? You always see the Tibetans always offer with their right hand. You know that, right? Like when we go around the stupa, you always go around clockwise with your right side of your body. It's only sort of secret mantra way to go around counterclockwise. Everything is done with the right. Tantra is kind of just the opposite, kind of heretical, everything done with the left. So So the demon just disappears then, and then Shariputra's just cut off his hand. And so at that point, he's thinking, if sentient beings are like this, how can I work for their welfare? And at that point, the bodhicitta, which is not yet stabilized, degenerated. That's the reference in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, Shariputra, Shantideva mentions at one point when he's talking about the Bodhisattva vow. Only the Buddhas can say how someone who's given up this aspiration for enlightenment, who's promised it and then given that up, how they could ever be born as a human again, something like that. So the commentary is saying this is referring to Shariputra, who somehow then was born, sometime later, maybe because of the great accumulation of merit, and became the Buddha's very close disciple. So it is possible to fall from the Mahayana, but in general, once you get past that beginning first part of the path of accumulation, the bodhicitta is stable, immutable, and you would not fall into the Hinayana path. Hinayana practitioners, after a certain point, also are pretty settled in that lineage, and they would not be easily enticed into the Mahayana because they've invested so much mental energy into that quest for arhatship. Well, let's go on a little bit. So, then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? What should they do? How should they meditate? Because he knows that Avalokiteshvara is a bodhisattva and is capable of answering that question. He said that, next paragraph, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvati Putra. So this is a longer version of Shariputra's name. This is from another point of his family lineage and so forth. You might wonder why, you might think we could just shorten this thing up. Instead of saying Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, you could just say, then he said to Avalokiteshvara. Why make it so wordy? Well, this is what was the sutra that was handed down, so there's some great blessings in this. It's always a bit dangerous, I think, to try to shorten things if you don't know the meaning for them. So this is what Avalokiteshvara replied, okay? He said, Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage. So here, in this version, Avalokiteshvara is now mentioning, as though from the Mahayana point of view, not just bodhisattva males, but gender inclusive, the male and female bodhisattva. Any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this. They should think about it in this way. Correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So I think Shariputra would know what five aggregates he was talking about when he said the five. Maybe you could say the five aggregates. The word here, yeah, you could say the, or you could say those. Because what's the main view of the transitory collection? Some of you who've studied, who's our good Sister Oma, the view of the transitory collection. Do you remember what that is?
It's the grasping of the eye and the mind, and it's part of the afflicted mind. Or
That's pretty good, yeah. What does it take as its referent object? Does it take the five aggregates? From the Mahayana point of view, it takes the conventionally existent I as its referent object and conceives that conventionally existent I, such as the merely labeled Oma, conceives that to be truly existent. But from the Hinayana point of view, that view of the transitory collection, that's a kind of ignorance when we talk about wrong views. That's the worst kind of wrong view. It's one subset of ignorance. It's a particular kind of ignorance that views your own self, not just the fake one, but the conventionally existent one, the Tenzin that does exist, that's merely imputed. It takes that as its sort of object of concern, and when thinking about it, conceives of it as being truly existent. Like, say, conceiving the reflection, your reflection in the mirror, as a real roommate. You know, not just, you know, because even until the 10th bhumi, even the bodhisattvas still see the reflection in the mirror, still see the appearance of truly existent phenomena, but they don't believe it. Okay, but from the Hinayana point of view, that wrong. What's the, maybe Diana will remember here. What's the referent object from the Hinayana point of view of the wrong view of the transitory collection?
The 5 aggregates?
Yeah. So they take the 5 aggregates, which truly exist from their point of view. They take the 5 aggregates as their object of reference, and they conceive of them as what? A self-supporting, substantially existent person. So Mahayana says that's not what actually happens. But here, so Shariputra will be familiar with this terminology. It's not like he'll be saying, what are you talking about, the 5 aggregates? You know, this is something he's completely conversant with, right? So Avalokiteshvara says, any son or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice this perfection of wisdom, they should do it in this way. They should look upon it like this. Correctly, that has to do with the way that this is being understood, not erroneously, not with an incorrect understanding, either refuting too much or refuting too little. We'll talk more about this as time goes on. And repeatedly, this is one way of translating this. Here, the sense of repeatedly meaning it's not enough to just have a glimpse of emptiness once. Ah, Satori, I'm finished, I've awakened. And sometimes people think that they go to some class, many times at Kopan. Have you had this experience? Who's been, Venerable, have you been at Kopan, leading course, meditation, something? Sometimes people, after the first day, they'll come up and say, I got it. I realized emptiness. Yeah. So it's like all, you know, I can leave now. I have no need to stay. So repeatedly means that in order to, even to realize emptiness directly, you have to, first of all, conceptually understand it correctly, and then repeatedly meditate on that. Then when you realize emptiness directly, it's not enough to stop at the path of seeing. What do you have to continue on? Path of meditation, in which the kind of the definition of the path of meditation is to realize that emptiness which was realized previously, again and again, with the added accumulation of merit that one gains in between meditative sessions. Okay?
So the path of seeing is achieved when one's realized emptiness directly?
You betcha. What did you think?
I wasn't sure how stable it was.
Path of seeing, when you've realized, okay, we said before that once you've developed, achieved bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta, at the very beginning it's not stable and you could fall from that. What about realizing emptiness? Mark, what do you think? Once you've realized emptiness directly on the path of seeing, is there some period of time when you can fall from that understanding and again get confused? And
As I understand it, no.
that's pretty good how you understand it. So when you've realized emptiness directly, a process takes place called cessation, true cessation. It doesn't mean everything, all erroneous views are ceased, but certain intellectually formed things that take place this lifetime, thinking who you are in that sense, those cease so that in any future life you'll never fall prey to this kind of misconception of the self. But there's still an inherently existent, a subtle form of the self, what we call innate sense of self, that still remains, that has to be meditated, has to be countered by meditating on emptiness again and again on the path of meditation. So correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also, not just the self, but those five aggregates which are the basis of the self, as empty of inherent nature. Was it Rwanda? No. What's it? Moana. What are the five aggregates? You've come from a Buddhist family. I'm going to write to Gabriel and Holly if you don't know the answer.
Body, feelings, composition, consciousness, discrimination.
Is that five? Is that body? What is it? Body, feeling, consciousness, discrimination. Yeah, it sounds like five. Somewhere like that. So usually we say different ways of enumerating, but generally the order is like this. The form aggregate, which includes mainly the body, right? All of everything, your blood vessels, your nose, your hair, the marrow, everything that's material is called the form aggregate. So that's one part of your being. It's not really you, but in a sense it's yours. We talk about I and mine. It's that which you conceive of as, sometimes you think of it as you. If someone sticks a pin in your hand, they are in a sense sticking you because you are imputed, you are designated or named to that collection. So you could say that's you, but usually we think of that as maybe me. Sometimes we think, oh, how nice I look or how bad I look. Also the feelings in the sense of, not feelings like, oh, I have feelings for you. Emotions. That's not what's meant by feelings. Feelings here means sensations of pleasure, unpleasant sensations, or neutral sensations. And all of our senses have that. Generally, our mental sensations are the main ones, unless we're sick and we have some physical pain, then we take different kinds of pain relievers because there's an unpleasant feeling. Okay? Feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, and then consciousness means primary consciousness. Usually that comes to the fifth one. So good. We covered some distance here. So let's finish here, do a little dedication, and we'll continue after next week, as most people are going to have a chance of hear His Holiness teaching about the 60 stanzas of reasoning, Rikpa Drukchupa, one of the 6 collections of reasoning by Nagarjuna, talking about emptiness. Does anyone have a book, a translation of it? You got? A place you can download it off the web. Yeah, you can look. If you look under Google, you can find some of the verses.
Click through to related events, you'll see the link.
Okay. Does it have the whole text or just some verses?
Well, I guess it's 60 stanzas, right?
Yeah, is there 60 stanzas? Okay, good. You can check that.
Yelwood.org, and then go to related events.
There's another text by Nagarjuna called 70 Stanzas on Emptiness. This is the 60 stanzas of reasoning. Okay. 70 stanzas is complicated? Oh, no, it's simple. I think it's quite, there's some complicated parts. Some of it is more accessible. So let's dedicate. Sit comfortably. Dedication of the merit that we've created, particularly tonight, because when bodhisattvas do any activity, they begin with motivation. In the middle, they try to do the activity with concentration, doing it correctly. And at the end, they dedicate the merits so that they will not be exhausted. So think, due to these merits, may I quickly achieve enlightenment, and from that state be able to lead each and every sentient being, even those that dislike me now, I have problems with, lead everyone out of compassion with skill, lead them into that very same state as a result of these merits I've created tonight. and then try to seal the dedication, the conventional dedication, within the emptiness of the three spheres. The emptiness of the merits. Merits are that we conceive of here, knowing that virtuous karma was created. Although we conceive of them, they can't be found anywhere. They're like the self, merely imputed to a collection of parts, but they still function. The goal dedicated to, merely imputed, doesn't inherently exist, can't be found even in the future. Our enlightenment for the welfare of others, although it can come about conventionally, and the act of dedication involving the sense of self, aspiring that these merits ripen in that way, one cannot find a dedication inherently existing from its own side. It's just a name that we designate to this succession of mind moments, conceiving of these various things. Although empty, they still function.